started, please rise for the pledge. Mrs. Sugars, will you please take roll call?
Mrs. Arroyo.
Here.
Ms. Friedel.
Here.
Mr. Goodwin.
Here.
Mrs. Matlack.
Here.
Mrs. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here.
Mrs. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Tong.
Here.
Mrs. Seidel.
Here. Okay, next up, we'll have our approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the special meeting minutes and executive session minutes dated December 7th, 2019, and also approval of regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes dated December 17th, 2019. Do I have a second? Mr. Avadia. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
The minutes from December 7th. There you go. Okay, so we have 8 yes votes and 1 abstention from Mrs. Friedel. Okay. And then we now have approval of minutes. So we have Mrs. Bell, Mr. Abadia. Take the vote on these as well. These are for minutes from December 17th. We have 7 yes votes and 3 abstentions. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Next, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Malash for some board recognition.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. I'm going to ask Mrs. Wilson to join me up at the podium. Very excited because this evening we're going to recognize the boys cross-country team from High School East from their exploits and their success this past fall. So students and student athletes, when we recognize you, we're going to ask you to come up to the microphone. You don't have to speak. We're going to give you a certificate. We're going to shake hands. And you're going to come around and shake hands with the board members. After we go through everybody and everybody gets introduced, Mrs. Wilson's going to go out in the hallway with you right by the front and present you or take a picture of all of you together. You are welcome to come back and join us for the rest of the meeting. We have lots of exciting stuff to discuss, but you certainly do not have to stay. So, Mrs. Wilson, if you would meet me up there. And I believe our cross-country coach, at least one of them, is here. Come on up.
Okay, so as Dr. Malash said, we are recognizing the East Boys Cross Country team under the direction of Coach Chris Corey. They, this year, earned, this is a long certificate this evening, they earned 2nd place in the Olympic Conference, 2nd place Group 4 South, and 3rd place in the state championship. Coach, if you would like to read the names and hand out the certificates, we'll do that.
First athlete, Ethan Anderer. Michael McCurdy. Dylan Hagan. Gabe Rodriguez. Max Haught. Paul Bruce. Mason Bulicki. Justin Whitney. Enrique Perez. Justin. Sorry, sir. Skipped over one. There you go, Justin. Aiden Air. Jacob Cheng. Oliver Adler. Aiden Groff. That's all of them. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash again, as I've been told there is another item he needs to cover.
There is. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. We actually have a special presentation tonight that is a surprise for the board that we did not list on the agenda. As we talked about at the previous board meeting, January is School Board Recognition Month, and it's something that we recognize and we observe in the state of New Jersey every year as established by the New Jersey School Boards Association. And tonight, we have 3 members of the Executive Council Board of our Zone PTA, Mrs. Janet Hung, Mrs. Michelle Vogel, and Mrs. Steffi Graf. They're going to come up and provide to the podium some recognition and some thanks for our Board of Education members. Ladies.
Hi. We just want to thank you for your efforts as the Board of Education, and like Dr. Malash said, recognize you for everything that you do on behalf of the Zone PTA and all the other PTAs. And we just have a little token of our appreciation for you all.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to move into correspondence. Does anyone have any correspondence to share this evening? Okay, if no one else does, I have several items. The first, I'd like to share a letter the board received from Mr. Joel Fleischer, and I'll just read it. To the Board of Education and Central Administration, I am honored and proud to be the first recipient of the Heart of the District Certificate for Volunteer Achievement. It has been my pleasure to work with the elementary children for the past 16 years, and I plan to continue with this work. Again, thank you for all of this honor. Very truly yours, Joel Fleischer.
And Mrs. Seidel, just as you read Mr. Fleischer's letter to the board, as you know, he was recognized at the board meeting on the 14th. And then on last week, Mrs. Wilson, was it last Friday? When was the, he's going to be featured this week. They filmed yesterday over at Barton, but he's going to be featured on CBS 3 with Chandler Lutz on Thursday morning and then Thursday evening on the 3 Cheers. So I will send out the information to the board so you have that, and we will include a link through our social media this weekend after it's up and about.
Great, thank you for that. Next, I wanted to just share some items. Mr. Ovadia and I had an opportunity to attend the Fair Funding for Cherry Hill Public Schools meeting that was held on January 23rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. There were 7 people in attendance, including Mr. Ovadia, myself, and Mrs. Wilson. So there was an agenda that we followed pretty strictly. There were some things that we covered under the update section. There was news about a security grant that we did not receive that you were all made aware of previously. We talked about underfunded and unfunded mandates that come down from our legislators, for example, enforcement of HIB, park, hardware, infrastructure, those types of things. We received an update from the Alternative Funding Committee, of which Lori, who heads up the Fair Funding Initiative, is a member of the Alternative Funding Committee as well. So she shared with us an update from that last meeting, which again, we've all shared here. And then we talked a little bit about the 2020-2021 budget funding release date and if it was currently scheduled to be on time for February, which as of right now, that's the information that we have, that it will be on time. Next, the committee talked about marketing and moving forward. And Lori passed out some items that I will pass around for you guys to take a look at, and we'll all receive copies once they've been reviewed by the committee. But she put together a backgrounder document that just sort of gives an update of the why the committee was formed. There's fair funding talking points, and then several comparison charts. So I'll just pass these around. You guys can take a look at them. They are going to be reviewed by the committee, and then they'll be available for the committee to pass out throughout all of their work. They are going to be working on updating their website, and the Move On petition email addresses, they are going to work on revising that. I believe Mr. Ovadia was handling some of that before he was on the board, so they need to have somebody else take that over. So there was some discussion about that. The committee is also looking to make an appointment with the new mayor to introduce themselves and talk about moving forward, and also continue their touch base with the legislators. They would love more people to attend and come to the meetings. So I told Lori Deach that I would give out her email address if anybody is interested in joining the Fair Funding Initiative. And it is cdeitch68804@comcast.net. And their next meeting is scheduled for February 27th, 2020. And I am going to be the board liaison to that committee, and then additional board members are going to rotate through as well. So this month, Mr. Ovadia joined me, and we'll see who has availability for the February meeting. And then my last piece of correspondence, we had a community member reach out to us with some concerns about safety and security. And as you all know, safety and security is our primary concern. So I wanted to just share with you a statement that Dr. Malash had put out in his Friday newsletter. So many of you may have already seen it. So I apologize if it's redundant, but it bears repeating. So I just want to take a moment and share with you our our response to those safety and security concerns. The safety and well-being of our children and staff in the Cherry Hill Public Schools is the top priority of the administration and Board of Education. It also is one of the most emotional topics of conversation in our community, and understandably so. We all share the common ground of caring deeply about keeping safe the 11,000 children and 1,700 staff members who enter our buildings each day. As a district, we follow best practices in security as recommended by the New Jersey Office of School Preparedness, our local law enforcement, our district director of security, and mental health professionals. What is the best way to contribute to greater safety in our schools? Work with the district. In the words of Jeff Gale, director of the New Jersey Office of School Preparedness, at our October 2019 Safety and Security Forum, quote, "We all have to contribute to the security of our school environment. It is not one of those things where we look at our district and say, whatever's going on, I don't like it, deal with it." Also, quote, "How we teach our kids to deal with authority becomes very, very important during emergencies." Another quote, "Recognize things, report things, and to do it appropriately. Don't post it all over the internet." And a fourth quote, "Have a legitimate conversation with somebody and point out something that they might not be aware of that can address a security concern." And then lastly, he quotes, "I've interacted with the principals from Columbine, survivors from Virginia Tech, the SRO from Arapahoe, the father who lost his daughter from Platte Canyon, and what you'll find is what you're doing here," and he's referencing Cherry Hill, "and what your school is falling in line with and was doing even before we set foot in the door really does have your kids' best interests at heart." Mr. Gale said at the forum, "I think you should feel good collectively as parents. You should understand that this is a process. It's not a goal where you run across the finish line and say, we're done with this. That's not how this works. You're all a part of this process." So we look forward to continuing our work for improved safety and security in our schools in collaboration with experts in the field, the members of our Safety and Security Committee, and any community member who wishes to contribute. Thank you. Now we're going to move into our student representative reports, and I'm going to start with West tonight and ask Maria to tell us what's going on at West.
Good evening, everyone. So to start out, we're going to talk about some West athletics. Our girls swim team is currently undefeated with a record of 7-0, and we are group champions this year. And both boys and girls swim team are competing against East tonight. The boys' record is 3-4, and it's also their senior night, so we'd like to give a huge thank you to all the seniors on the swim teams and all their hard work and dedication that they've given to the swim team over their past 4 years. The boys' basketball team has a record of 10-4, and they play against Eustis earlier today, and so did the girls' basketball team, and their record is currently 11-3. The girls' wrestling team continues to recruit more people to the team, and they've been training super hard this season as it was only introduced last year, so they're all working very hard to continue to recruit more girls to join wrestling, and they've put a lot of work into the team. The boys' wrestling team has a record of 17-7, and they've put a lot of hard work into this season. For miscellaneous, this morning the principals committee and we met with the Qualia Institute, and they discussed student voice. So we met with them this morning. This was our follow-up meeting. We had a meeting earlier in the year around October, and basically we sat down this morning and talked about all the improvements that have been made in student voice, showing that students are now speaking up a lot more, and people have learned to use their voice. And us as the principals committee are bringing what we're learning with Qualia, we're bringing it to the classroom, and we're discussing it with our staff during professional development meetings, and we're discussing it with our classmates. Our Virtua interns have completed their rounds. Earlier last week, we presented our experience at Virtua to the department heads at the hospital. And after we were done, the woman, Dr. Palatnik, came up to me, who's in charge of the whole program, and she runs it with Ms. Roskoff. And she said that they are truly honored to have West students intern at their hospital. They look forward to it every year. And every year the batch of students that come in are more dedicated and just love being there. And it has been an honor to participate in that program, and the students are really thankful for it. our Penn Medicine interns that also started this year just completed their program, and they actually put together presentations. They were offered the opportunity to give solutions to problems that occur at hospitals. So Penn gave them a list of problems that they struggled with at their hospital, and our high school students were able to give solutions to these problems. And the hospitals have thanked us for our dedication and our time that we've put in, and now the students will be volunteering at clinics of their choice. 8th grade visitation is tomorrow night at West. The different clubs and sports teams have put together presentations that they will be presenting to the 8th graders, and we're super excited to meet them all tomorrow. And our theater department has concluded auditions for our show that we will be putting on, We Will Rock You, and they have begun getting ready for their show, so we can't wait to see what they'll put together for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Jacob from East.
My report will be much shorter. For East, we had our Unity Day that happened last week, where there were about 75 students to 60 students who stayed after school and listened to presentations and discussions and activities with leaders of diverse multicultural groups and other leaders in the school to talk about how we can increase the influence of diversity in our school and how we can be more considerate of the different populations that reside in it. Classes started switching today because it's the beginning of the second semester, so we saw a lot of freshmen and even some sophomores and not knowing exactly where their classes were today, so that was a bit funny at every single period. It's also the official start of senioritis season. There were 113 students at East who moved forward into DECA States this year, and that's a very big accomplishment for East. We're very proud of our DECA success in past years, and we're glad that after the class of 2019 and 2023 graduated, we continued to build on that success year after year. East students and service clubs participated in the MLK Day of Service, where they bonded together and came together to package food and create food for the needy in our town and surrounding communities, and that was a really great sight to see, especially when there were hundreds of students who came, and it was really a diverse group from all different grades and all different ethnicities, so it was really great to see that everyone came together and was able to bond with other students across the community and really get stuff done for the people who need it. The freshman dance was Friday the 10th, and that went off without a hitch. It was also the same day as the hockey game, so there was a little bit lower attendance than there usually was, but the hockey game won 7-3, so it was also good for our hockey team that they proceeded to come in first place in their division once again. In terms of robotics news, there has been at least one group that has won every single New Jersey competition they've attended this year so far, and they've come in first place in every single one with at least one group. And in the future, the most successful team is traveling to DC to compete in a U.S. tournament that can give them direct access to the world competitions if they succeed in there. So that's a big thing coming up for the East Robotics Club, and we wish them future success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria and Jacob. As usual, great reports. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. This first public comment session is for agenda items only. There will be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting. If you would like to speak now, please identify the agenda item, speak into the microphone, and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. Anyone? Okay. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash for the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So we are almost to the end of January, and as Jacob said, we are at the midpoint of the year. In fact, tomorrow is the 91st day of school, which puts us exactly in the middle. There's 182 student days in Cherry Hill. So June 17th, which is our final student day, assuming that the weather stays as it is and has been, is only a little more than 91 days of school away. So we're right in the middle. And I always like to, when I see students in the buildings or talk with the teachers, is to ask them at this point, so now that we are halfway through, do you think that you are halfway done this year? Have you accomplished what you want to accomplish so far? And if not, what do you need to do? What do you need to focus on between now and June, or between now and the end of February, or now and the end of March, or now and the end of April? Right? It's about setting achievable goals. Maria and Jacob and the rest of the seniors will be making their final decisions about college and about work and about the military over the next couple of months. And it'll be exciting as we're preparing for the 8th graders to come into the high schools. We've done the 8th grade course of study nights have taken place. The curriculum office, the high school folks have been at all 3 middle schools to speak with students and speak with parents. I had the opportunity to be over at Carusi the other day when they had some parents that came in during the day to receive the presentation and have discussion. And again, people are excited about this transition, and it's about preparation for what that transition looks like. We know from the seniors, especially the ones that we get to see on a regular basis, that the kids are very well prepared to move beyond the confines of our school district and our community. And we want to make sure that every child that's making that transition is prepared and has that same opportunity. The 5th grade open houses for the middle schools are in the midst of taking place as well, as the students decide whether or not they want to put in for the open enrollment to attend Rosa or attend their neighborhood school of either Beck or Carusi. So again, very exciting times as we go through. It was very nice to have folks from the Zone PTA. And for those of you that don't know, the Zone PTA in Cherry Hill is kind of unique because of the PTA structure that we have. There are 19 individual PTAs in Cherry Hill. 18 that are school-based, so each one of the comprehensive schools from Barclay up through the high schools has a PTA. Then there's a special ed PTA that represents the entire district and is made up of parents throughout. Zone PTA is made up of the presidents from each one of the individual PTAs, as well as other folks that have served on the executive committee, and serves as an umbrella organization. So those 3 parents that were here tonight came out to represent the 6,500 or so families that we know that we represent within the district. And to do it for School Board Recognition Month is something that's incredibly important. Folks that do not have the opportunity to sit at this table as a member of the Board of Education and live in the limelight and sit out here, two evenings a month in the public meetings or during the committee meetings that take place once a month, or attend the activities during the school day or attend the activities on a weekend or in the evening, really don't have an idea about the time that each one of you dedicates of yourself. The physical time, the emotional investment, and again, on behalf of the staff, the 1,700 members of the staff, the 11,000 children, and our entire community, I am grateful that each one of you has chosen to be a member of the school board. You put yourselves through a lot for no pay, for very little thanks on a regular basis. So I do think it's incredibly important. I'm grateful for Zone PTA coming out and recognizing all of you, and I'm thankful as well. As Jacob talked about, tonight is the East-West swim meet. It's always an exciting evening in Cherry Hill. Swim is always something that's been very important in Cherry Hill. It's a great night for the meet. Looking forward to hearing about the results. And again, kids are in that pool who swim together during the summer and swim separately or swim in clubs together. So it's always an exciting evening. We are in the midst of the winter sports season, and I'm glad the kids reported out on it. Getting ready to come into the state tournament time. Make sure you are following along. We have a number of teams and individuals in each one of the sports, from track to wrestling to basketball to swim, who will be competing at the state level. So we will look forward to that. I'm very excited. Next week, we'll be hosting students from Rowan University in the Project Impact program. Project Impact has been at Rowan, I think this is the 5th year. It's in a program that seeks to diversify the teaching population with male teachers of color. We have a number of administrators in the district who serve as mentors in that program. This will be the 2nd year that we have welcomed the students from the program at Rowan to Cherry Hill. Last year we met with folks from Rowan and had students from our district because they're looking to recruit students and talk about people going into the field of education, which I firmly believe is the best job possible, is to become an educator. So late next week, we'll recognize the students from Rowan as they come out. They will meet with our students. We have students from East and West who have signed up, and from the alternative high school. They will all travel over to High School West. There will be a reception, and they'll spend some time together to find out what does it mean and why are they talking about becoming educators. Any child that you can encourage to become an educator, I think you're making a great recommendation and recommending that they go into the greatest field in the world. Last week we did observe Martin Luther King Day and the MLK Day of Service. Again, Cherry Hill continues to be involved, not just in the region-wide program which is the oldest one and I believe the largest one in the country that's housed over at Girard College, but we had individual programs going on in each one of our schools. Some that began the week before, some that occurred the day of, and some that have continued on. So again, service is something incredibly important to us in the district, and I'm glad to see and to read about all the different activities that the students, staff members, and family members participated in this past week. This week is also the Kindness Challenge. It's a worldwide opportunity, but it's something that many of our schools participate in, especially at the elementary level. Many of our schools had kindness tunnels yesterday morning, the opportunity to be at Horace Mann, where staff members, members of town council, school board members, members of the police department and the fire department welcome the children as they arrived at school, to celebrate the kids and to celebrate and talk about how important kindness is. It's one of those things that each of us can choose on a daily basis. Modeling that for children, talking about that with children, making something that's incredibly important, we believe will help to carry them through their lives. So continue to follow along on our social media. You can see the programs and the projects that are going on at each one of the schools. And again, I don't think we can ever talk too much about kindness and about being kind.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. We are now going to move into our action agenda, and I will ask Mrs. Matlack to move the C&I agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. 2, approval of out-of-district student placements for the 2019-2020 school year. 3, approval for Title I Summer Academy 2020. 4, approval of summer programs for 2020. And 5, resolution to approve a professional service proposal. Do I have a second? Mrs. Schultz, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I will open up the online voting for the C&I items 1 through 5. Are there any abstentions on any of the items? Okay. We have a unanimous vote. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Now I will ask Mrs. Schultz to move our B&F agenda.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, financial reports. Number 2, resolution for the award of transportation. Number 3, approval of Cherry Hill, McKinney, Vento, DCPMP students going out of district for the 2019-2020 school year. Do I have a second? Mrs. Seidel, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay. The voting is open for the B&F items 1 through 3. Are there any abstentions? Mrs. Schultz.
I need to abstain to Beata Home Health on the bill list.
Okay. Are there any others? Okay, it's unanimous vote. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Mrs. Tong, will you please move our human resources agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Dale. The superintendent recommend I move the following. 1, termination of employment certificated. 2, termination of employment non-certificated. 3, appointment certificated. 4, appointment non-certificated. 5, leave of absence certificated. 6, leave of absence non-certificated. Assignment salary change certificated. 8, assignment salary change non-certificated. Other compensation certificated. Do I have a second? Mr. Valia, are there any questions? See none, Mrs. Sugar?
The voting is open. Are there any abstentions on any particular items on the human resources agenda? Okay, it's a unanimous vote. Motion carries.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary, will you please move policy and legislation?
Sure. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying, investigation decisions. Number 2, second reading of policies. And then there is an item on the yellow sheet, Item 3, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decisions. Do I have a second? Ms. Seidel, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, the online voting is open for policy and legislation items 1 through 3. Are there any abstentions on particular items, Mrs. Neary?
Yes, I have to abstain from item number 3 on hearing decisions.
Are there any other? Mr. Vadia?
I have to abstain 1 and 3.
1 and 3, okay. Mrs. Friedel, 1 and 3.
I need to abstain from item 3, please.
Item 3.
Okay, so we have, for item 1, we have 8 yes votes and 2 abstentions, 7 yes votes and 2 abstentions. Item 2 is a unanimous vote, and item number 3 has 4 abstentions and 5 yes votes.
Thank you. Now we're going to move in strategic planning, and while there aren't any items to move on the action agenda, we are going to use the time to have a discussion about the 2-day strategic planning sessions that were held on January 14th and 15th. So I'm going to first turn it over to Dr. Malash, who's going to give us a summary of the 2 days, and then we will open it up to the 3 board members who participated to add their feedback, and then we'll have a discussion as a board. Dr. Malash?
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So as you know, we've been having a discussion about the strategic planning process going back to last summer. It grew out of the work of the ad hoc committee for the board that met last spring. One of the recommendations was to have a more specific strategic planning process. We've been working with Mrs. Judith Wilson as the facilitator of the process, and Mrs. Wilson has gone through a number of different steps going back into September. She met with board members, she met with focus groups of students, focus groups of parents, administrators, staff members at different levels, staff members certificated and non-certificated back in the fall to collect information about their perspective and about what was going on in the district and where they believed we should be going and where they want us to be, what works well, what needs to be worked on and improved upon. And then in December, as a follow-up to that process, there were surveys that were put out. Community surveys, surveys for parents at each of the 3 different levels, surveys for students at each of the 3 different levels, surveys for administrators, surveys for certificated staff, surveys for non-certificated staff. And we had tremendous response from the surveys. And then on January 14th and 15th, as you talked about, there was a group of folks that got together in this room. There were 27 people that participated in the process between Tuesday and Wednesday, January 14th and 15th. In the makeup of the group, there were 9 teachers, 9 certificated staff members, again from all the way from kindergarten teachers to high school teachers and middle school teachers that had different backgrounds, taught different content areas, and represented different levels. There was a support staff member. There were 3 Board of Education members who were here for both of the days, 1 Board of Education member who was here for one of the days. There were 4 parents who were involved, again, representing different schools and different groups. There were administrators from the high school, the middle school, and from the district and from the elementary level. Then there were 4 students. There was a high school senior from East and West and a high school junior from East and from West who participated. Again, with the intent and the idea of being able to capture different perspectives and different voices. So a tremendous discussion, and it was work during those 2 days. Mrs. Wilson doesn't mess around, as a facilitator. And we came in and we began, a discussion between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And then really from 9 o'clock straight through to a little after 2 o'clock with a working lunch in the middle that we went through and talked about what we value, who we are, and where we are going, along with the opportunity to truly take a look at, some of the information that came out of that survey. And then there was a work product that came out of that. As we started the discussion on the Tuesday, Mrs. Wilson centered us by reviewing and going over the mission statement that the board adopted in 2017. And the mission statement says, "We shall provide all children with an education that develops open-minded thinkers with the strong academic and interpersonal skills to thrive in an ever-changing world and make it a better place for all." And that's a statement that we referred back to, that we used again as our center in terms of our discussion. And the way that we described this was, after gathering information, input, and perspective from a cross-section of the Cherry Hill community, a team of students, parents, teachers, support staff, administrators, and board members recommends the following strategic goals for the academic growth and well-being of our educational community. Okay, and I'm going to read that again to all of you, right? And again, you saw this when I put it in your memo this weekend. This group that got together after gathering information, input, and perspective from a cross-section of the Cherry Hill community, a team of students, parents, teachers, support staff, administrators, and board members recommends the following strategic goals for the academic growth and well-being of our educational community. And for the next 5 years or so, recommending these strategic goals: building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency, we will, 1, focus on student wellness, create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. 2, purpose and passion, develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. And the third one, connecting beyond our classrooms, provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. Again, what I believe are 3 incredibly powerful statements that were developed by that group. And the perspective of what the intention would be for us as we move forward occurs on a couple of different levels. For one, when we come back in February, we're going to ask the board to endorse and to adopt these strategic goals for 2020 and beyond. And what these goals will serve is the overarching themes that we will look to, as we create board goals each year, as schools create individual goals, as administrators create professional development goals, as staff members create goals. But these will be the 3 themes that we will use to guide us as a district. And whether it's talking about development of the referendum, whether it's talking about what we need to do in terms of instructional modality in our classrooms, or experiential learning that we provide for our children, that these goals, these strategic goals, can provide that foundation for us. And again, over the course of those 2 days, it is, for me, in working in groups like this, it is fascinating to look as the group comes from 26 or 27 people, individuals, some who have connections and know one another, truly to coalesce into a moving and working body, and to sit here on Wednesday afternoon for the better course of an hour and 20 minutes, until a little after 2 o'clock, as people debated the words, honestly, individual words that were included in these statements, where commas were located, what words meant, what an underlying meaning of the word. And it didn't matter whether it was one of the high school students, whether it was me, whether it was one of the principals, a board member, a parent, or a support staff member. Everybody participated. Everybody talked. Everybody shared their voice. Where it truly, like I said, the group coalesced and came together, that it really was a functional body to put this together. So that's one piece. So we will ask the board to endorse these, to adopt these in February. The next piece is we will look to seek committees of staff members and of people from in the district now to start to flesh out, what do these mean? So how do you do something actionable with these, right? Because the worst thing that can happen in a strategic planning process, and when I welcomed everybody on Tuesday when we got together, is I don't really like the word strategic planning. I don't like what the meaning or what just the overbearing definition that some folks will attach to that word, because sometimes I don't think it necessarily has a meaning. But what we do in this process is that we have to frame it, right? It has to be something that is actionable. These are great statements. I think they contain great meaning, and they will provide great guidance for us as a school district, for the board, and for the folks that work here. But we need to have actionable steps. So what does that mean? What does that mean that we're going to do this year? What does that mean short term? What does that mean that we're going to do long term? So we want to provide life to these, right? Something that we can see and that we can feel and that we can touch. So that'll be the next step. So I will update the board in February about where we are in that process. We started to flesh out what those groups will look like, and then we'll move forward from there. And again, there were 4 of you, 3 of you that were there for both of the days. Lisa and Ms. Seidel, you were able to be with us for one of the days. So if you want to talk about, what your experiences were, what you saw, I think that's beneficial to help round it out for everybody else as well.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. As you mentioned, I was only able to attend day 1, but I'm glad that I was able to participate. It was really educational, and as you said, it's always great to be a part of something where everybody is there for the same goal. Everybody's working together for the common good, and it really was a cross section of our community, which was fantastic, and all voices were represented. I guess the one thing that I will add that I found fascinating when we had an opportunity to pull down some of the data from the surveys and take a look at them, these themes that have come out of the work were obvious in those results from the community who took the time to complete the surveys. So this truly is, taking the individual community voice and packaging it into something, as you said, that, we take and make actionable steps going forward. So for me, I was disappointed that I wasn't able to participate for both days, but glad that I had an opportunity for a short time. But now I'll turn it over to, I'll see if Ms. Neary or Ms. Matlack or Mr. Avadia would like to jump in, as I know you guys had the opportunity to participate on both days.
Thank you. So I attended both days, and I have to say, Dr. Malash is not kidding when it was an intense 2-day experience. There was a lot of debate, and Mrs. Wilson did hold to a working lunch. There was barely time to fill your plate to sit down to get right back into what we were doing. What I really appreciated and I found eye-opening was going through the surveys, but to me more important, what the students had to say about what they wanted. And I do believe it is reflective, although there was a lot of debate, amongst what the statements say and, does it hold true to what we're seeing? And I think the action plans will really flush that out. But I think it would be hard if you went back out and were to survey the students again to see how they felt about it. And maybe we should do that. Does it align with the heart of what they were asking for? And I think it does. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it definitely, eye-opening is the best way that I could put it, how the students felt about where we needed to go, and it really does appear to be, a paradigm shift, and I think it's great, and I'm really looking forward to what those next steps are. And everyone was truly engaging. No one was quiet. Everybody spoke. Everybody had something to say, and everybody was free to go ahead and speak and comment and provide their thoughts. So it was a great experience. Thanks.
Thank you. So just to echo some of the sentiments, it was an intense few days. I was very glad to be part of the process. A couple things I wanted to highlight. One, there really was a certain, I felt like I mean, you get 27 people together. I feel like everyone really participated, was very engaged, minimal screen time. People really kind of came together, and it was neat because, at least from my perspective, this isn't really a group I get to be part of all that often. So it's good to just see, just the wealth of ideas and passion about getting to somewhere. I thought Judith Wilson was fantastic. A couple things that really sort of rang out from my experience with her. To be bold and audacious. We can do things that everyone can agree with, but how can we do something that's bold? And then on the other side of it, how can we do something that's defined? We can put things together, I think, where the words sound good and it sounds lofty and great and, wonderful, but then what do you do with it? And if that sort of sits on the wall, what happens? I think we spent a lot of time talking about, technology as a tool, but goals being places that we wanted to go, and where technology could be useful, but where technology in and of itself isn't the end, it's more of a means. I think that the group that came together, everyone, just reading what Dr. Malash just recently read, when we read it at the end of 2 days, I think everyone felt very good about it. And part of it for me was when Judith Wilson was saying, you know, these are all good things, but what if we were known as a district great at these three things? You know, how would we feel? And I really felt, you know, proud of kind of like, you know, this you know, casting off in this direction, knowing that, you know, of course you do need meat on the bones, you do need to figure out where this is taking us. But what a great casting the line to the student wellness, the purpose and passion, connecting beyond our classrooms. So I felt it was a great process, and it was a fun and interesting thing with all the passionate people around to be a part of.
Well, I too was glad to be able to participate for both days, the full days, and just a couple of observations. And Lisa and Laurie and Ben have said many of the things that I would have said as well. Mrs. Wilson was wonderful. The process was terrific. It was a great process. A couple of things that I noticed when we came in. Everybody's sitting there, and it's like, do you know what we're going to do? And nobody knew what was going to happen, what we were going to do. And when Mrs. Wilson started, she did a tremendous job of focusing what we were going to do and bringing us together to do that and refocusing us as we went through the process, because there were little, glitches here and there where people got a little sidetracked. But for the most part, by the time we got to the second day, the committee was focusing committee members. There was, we took the surveys and went through the surveys. We had these huge papers all over the place with, what we got from the surveys. And then everybody's walking the hallway and walking around here, reading them and, putting stickers on things, trying to make sense of what everything was, because there was so much, trying to find themes. And when we were discussing that, there was one comment from somebody on the committee who said, something like, I don't even remember what they commented on, but it was like, well, I have an idea. And somebody else on the committee said, well, that's great, but we're focused on the surveys and we're focused on the themes that have come out. And that person was like, oh, yeah. And so it was great to see that the committee came together and was refocusing ourselves on what our goal was. And another thing that was wonderful, before we even finished the goals and had them up there, there was still discussion happening about the words and the commas. There was a lot of discussion about commas, which I appreciate, because I appreciate the comma discussion. But while that was still going on, some of the staff were saying, just asking other people sitting around, well, what about the committees, for the action steps? Are we allowed to participate? They were excited about the work we were doing and wanted to continue. And so that said to me that this is good work. This is not just, something on paper. This is alive. This is good work. So just a few of my observations. Thank you for letting me be there.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board want to ask questions, comments? Obviously, this is an ongoing discussion. We've talked about in the past that we'll be discussing these items in strategic planning, both at committee meetings and at the full table for some time to come. But if anybody has anything else they want to ask. Mrs. Friedel?
Yes. Well, I'm feeling left out that I didn't get to go. It sounds like it was a great 2-day meeting. Just a couple of questions. Do we have the data how many surveys were received?
We do. I did not bring the binder down. Yes,
Okay.
I can provide that to you.
Okay.
There were thousands.
Okay, and will we get a summary of some type of, the themes or the results?
So, yes, but not in a traditional sense, right? So the summary of the themes and the information that came through is what the resultant statements, that we have. And we did spend time talking about that, as a group, to get mired in, and there's literally thousands of responses, and whether it's the charts you look through with the Likert scales, right? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or the open-ended questions, to get mired in that, I don't think would do us any good. It's something that Judy talked about as well. But in summation, it's really these three statements that bear out what was shared through there and thematically what came out through the lens and the eyes of the 27 folks that participated. But I do have a paper copy of all of it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question.
Ms. Schultz?
Is conceptually the idea for the committees to have a committee, like 3 committees, one for student wellness, one for purpose and passion, and then one for connecting beyond the classroom?
Yes.
And so now that the strategic goals are set, will we start talking about them in strategic planning and our next steps, along with the sort of the building physical reviews that we've been already doing in strategic planning? So this is sort of like, there's all this parallel work happening, right? There's these new strategic goals, there's the review of the school buildings and their the sort of the physical things that we've been doing, and then there's discussion of of a next referendum. So all of those are parallel discussions that at some point will start to tie together.
Yes, that's correct, Mrs. Seidel. Right, so those paths have, as you said, run parallel as we're going through over the next couple of months. They will start to converge. There'll be the little on-ramps together. Part of that process, like I say, in February, we'll ask the board to formally adopt these, which will then take those two and lump them together. With strategic planning, we will, beginning next week, because the committee meetings are just next week, and don't forget, next Monday, we will start to talk about these 3 goals in strategic planning, and by the end of the springtime, they will all be on the same path.
I mean, I'm assuming as an example, like when we start to talk about referendum and goals and things like that, we're going to start to have the discussion of reconfiguring of a classroom, and we're going to have that discussion with how does that relate to connecting beyond our classroom. That's always going to, that should be at the forefront of every discussion when it comes to reconfiguring, taking out, awaying, adding this building, or especially when we're having those future discussions, which was the reason why this piece was so important. Because we can't, it's not going to do us any good to put the referendum together if we don't know where we're going. So this is the underlying theme that should be at the forefront of every discussion now moving forward. Is how
Correct.
I'm understanding
Yes.
your explanation.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd say you understand. It's very articulate.
And then we'll see the action steps in the future once those committees meet and come together with what those look like.
Yes, those as well will come through strategic planning initially and then be presented to the full board. We'll have folks come out and present them.
Okay, that was my question. The committees will come
Absolutely.
out. Okay.
Yes.
I would say thank you for the board members who gave up their time, 2 days, and working through your lunch. And the other 20 so members as well, because this good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So that brings us to our second public comment. This is the second public comment opportunity on any item. If you would like to speak now, please speak into the microphone and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. And it does look like we have a few students in the audience, so I will give any students an opportunity to speak first. Okay, seeing none?
Hi, my name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in 110 Coburn Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Funding. January 24, 2020, the superintendent of the the board president of the Toms River School District sent a letter to Senate President Stephen M. Sweeney. The superintendent and the business administrator met with him. and they were talking about the drastic cuts in their aid under S2, that even after a 2% levy increase, they're still behind, going to be short $4.3 million. They're really cut, and it involves the quality of their education and, of course, the safety of their children and all those things. And they use a cumulative amount. By the way, you should know that Toms River's tax rate, equalized tax rate, is about half what ours are. So our community is really being savaged. When did it begin? Well, if you read the testimony of Sharon Joshio from March 20th, 2007, she talks about the cuts back in 1988, 89, and she talks about an initial loss of 5.3 million in 1 year, and then a cumulative loss that actually was about $10 million off an original of 20.5 million. And that wasn't cumulative, that was the loss in aid. Now let's talk about cumulative loss. 5.3 million in 1 year lost. Then the next year, we lost on the average of $228,000 every year. So that's 5.3 million plus another 5.3 million plus the 728,000, or about 11.3 cumulative in 2 years. And if you keep on going over the 8-year period, the cumulative loss was actually $62.8 million over an 8-year period. Cumulative loss. Well, in today's dollars, that's over $100 million. And remember, today we're getting less aid than we did back 30 years ago. That's just over that 8-year period. We had a cumulative loss in today's dollars of $100 million. What you have in Toms River is school board, superintendent, union, mayor, state representatives working together, and now talking to Senator Sweeney, working together to help their district because they don't want to take the loss that Cherry Hill took between 30 and 20 years ago. And it's just compounded. It hasn't gotten better. But if you look at the numbers, you'll see that our cumulative loss in today's dollars, just for that 8-year period, was $100 million plus.
Thank you, Dr. Podowitz.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road, doing my every other week duty to come back to the board and tell you there are 100 kids at East. There are, I'm not even sure how many kids at Beck, Rosa, and actually apparently Carusi is starting a robotics club in 3 months. I don't know where these kids are going to go in 3 months, because in 3 months, the East Club will cease to exist. And the parents, and when we talk about it, they say, well, we went to the board meetings. We went to several board meetings. We've emailed. I don't know if it's clear that the public perception of when you tell the public to come to meetings and speak up, because that will make a difference, and people do that, and you don't take action, what that comes across as. It's really not a good look. And to be honest with you, I don't know why the district is starting a robotics club at Carusi when the West Robotics Club has not been to one competition since its existence. And the East Robotics Club is winning competitions, if not every weekend, every other weekend, throughout not just the state, but the tri-state area. But the district has not put $1 towards paying for the desperately needed advisors. And I say plural advisors, because one advisor clearly is, as Dr. Malashi mentioned, it's overwhelming for any teacher to think about taking on that responsibility right now. It's not a one-person job. So I again, I'm just going to say that, you know, the parents are really kind of not sure what else to do except to say, you know, you're taking away not just transferable skills, which I would say most of our athletics and many of our clubs offer our kids really good life skills and transferable skills that they can bring to the workplace, they can bring to their the rest of their life. The skills the students are getting in robotics are not just transferable skills, but they're real life college and job skills. And my involvement with it, with on behalf of my own kid and the other kids in the club, I can tell you the adults I've spoken to who work in the field, who work in the academics of technology, every single one of them says, well, the first question I'd want to interview that kid is for the job or for the colleges. Tell me about your robotics experience. Because these kids are getting the experiences that are required in every job. So again, my ask of the board and the administration is, what are you doing to find money to do that? There were two options that were presented to you by a community member that can be done before the next contract year, because that's too late. What are you doing to fund these positions so this club can continue to offer across all the schools this opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stern.
Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. Welcome, new board members, 2020. I have 3 goals, security goals for 2020 with you to advocate for you. Number 1 is the obvious vestibule problem we have going on in all 19 schools and all planning. I'm going to go over that. Number 2, and Mrs. Friedel last year started a petition to offer basic security. 53% of our schools do not have basic securities. Not talking about door locks, I'm talking about other things. And the 3rd goal, little up Mrs. Aurora's avenue, would be, why are we scaring the bejesus out of kindergartens in lockdown? Why are we not adopting procedures from Berlin schools? Why? We have a whole culture of children that we're scaring to death when a lockdown occurs. This does not need to occur. But my overall theme in 2020 is, don't let history repeat itself. Don't let another 2/27/18 occur when you had 26 students yelling at you about security. You have 53%. I don't want to go into the amount of police because the district will come out and brag about how many police they have, and they have the largest one, but I won't go into police numbers. Also, wouldn't it be great to just take a magic bus right now, security bus, take these board members, take them to the Marlton School, take you to the 3 Marlton schools and see all the mistakes that have been made. And I'm going to reiterate a speech from Mrs. Neary on September 25th, 2018. You will see we have a leadership problem, real leadership in specific times reacts. True leadership has forward independence and thought. When a problem arises or mistakes occur, leadership does not fear this. They embrace it, acknowledge it, and accept the moment to transform. When they see an error in course, they pivot. They do not shut it down. My correspondence sent a week ago is called Shutting It Down. You have an obvious problem. Your vestibules will fail, and you continue to build them, and you continue to ignore them. Does Mr. Gale know the full story about the vestibules? On March 15th, does he have all the videotapes? I've taken every videotape, every speech made. Some of the speeches are quite alarming. We chose these 2 schools because it's a fairly simple process to put vestibules in these buildings. If you're familiar with it, it's very easy to do. We again and again well, I'm running out of time, so I will not be able to finish this, but I will continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash, who is going to address some of these comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Again, Dr. Potowitz, thank you for your comments, and we'll continue to advocate with our legislators as we have done. It's certainly tied together, and Mrs. Seidel talked about being at the Fair Funding Committee meeting last week. Fair funding, the district being involved administratively, the board, and the board has a representation on fair funding. The association, the staff members pulling together as we've done through the last 4 years or 5 years or so, I think is something that's incredibly valuable, something that we will continue to do. We will continue that process. I agree with you. Mrs. Stern, or Ms. Stern, again, yes, we will continue to try to find advisors, for all of the robotics clubs within the district. As we've talked about a number of times, the process about creating a stipend or paying somebody to do something is a process, right, that we have to go through. Discussion about materials and purchasing materials has gone on at each one of the schools where robotics takes place, and there are offers that have been put out with that, as well as offers about transportation that have been made. We continue to look. We'll continue to look in district. We'll continue to look outside the district to find advisors for the programs. And where there's a student interest, we continue to attempt to find a way to provide that opportunity for the kids at the different schools. Mr. Short, I will invite you, as I have done in the correspondence that I've sent, to come in and spend time with us, to come so we can sit down and have a conversation. I truly believe that's one of the best ways to try to find common ground. And as I said in my most recent email to you, that I do believe that we have common ground. And the common ground is that we do take the safety and security of our children, the 11,000 plus that are here on a daily basis, and our 1,700 staff members as the most important thing that we do. But come in and sit down and talk with us. It's a much better way to get your questions answered, to have the dialogue that goes through. There are things about our security that we will not put out there publicly. We will not. Things that you may identify as security deficiencies, things that may have already been addressed, that we're not going to put out there publicly and say, this is where this is, or this is where that is. It's not safe for anybody that works in our buildings or that's in our schools. So as the Safety and Security Forum, again, which you attended back in the fall, Jeff Gale was there. Jeff Gale is the director of the Office of School Preparedness for the Department of Ed, right? Retired state trooper. He's the person that goes and speaks to other states when they're doing this. He's the one that comes through, right? We had a blue ribbon panel of folks that came out that night. We can always get people to come back down and to meet with us and speak with us. If you have additional questions, I am more than happy to answer them. But come in, spend some time with us. It would be a much more productive, I believe, dialogue to have.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Matlack and Mrs. Schultz. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.